Thank you so much for inviting me down, Alfonso, Jorge, and the rest of the Google team. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a privilege. I need to...
Just pass the slide. I think you're next. Huh?
Oh. Well, it's funny how Alfonso was relating to you about one car purchase that he was involved with. I had a similar experience recently. I live in San Francisco. It's a very congested city, similar to Mexico City, although smaller. Very hard to find parking. I looked for a car that was the shortest car I could find. It was a four-door, was my requirement. I needed a four-door car. And where did I start? How do I begin? I didn't care what brand it was. I didn't really care about the price. But I had a specific configuration in mind that I needed to find. I immediately went to the internet, plugged in a generic search term, cars, links, and through the process of actually comparing different configurations on consumer review sites and various sources online, I identified a Toyota brand called Scion. I don't know if it's available in Mexico, but it's a Toyota brand called Scion, and identified the actual model of the car, which was the XA, a short car, 11 inches longer than the Mini. And through that process, I compared it against a couple of other brands, Honda, and a few others, and ultimately made the decision to buy the Scion, went into the dealer, talked to them, confirmed the decision I was making, and made the purchase, and have been very happy with the car since. But what I am trying to relate is that personal needs and personal interests in configurations, whether it's a sports accompaniment to the car, speed, whether it is a stereo, whether it's off-road, everybody comes to these purchases with their own interests and needs in mind. More frequently that are product related than price related, as we'll see. Anyway, Alfonso introduced the company NetPop Research. We were Media Screen, and maybe you've seen some of our research for Google in the past. The reason why we changed the name is because we have launched a syndicated research study where we sell results, not just primary research that we conduct on behalf of clients. And the product, NetPop, which focuses on the US and China internet markets. And two of those markets comprise 50% of the worldwide internet population. The attention we received from that was pretty stellar. We decided to just hit the product's 8 companies. So anyway, let's jump into the research. We will be covering highlights from our research today. There are many sections of the study that we won't present today. I'll tell you at the end which ones those are. But Jorge and his team will certainly be happy to show those to you one-on-one. But today we will focus on the market profile and really go through the consumer perspective on how they research and consider and then finally decide on purchasing cars. And we will focus on manufacturer websites and search engines in that process. So Alfonso also mentioned it was a worldwide study. We're conducting it in 16 countries. We've completed 9 so far. It focuses on both new and used car purchasers. For today's presentation, we will be focusing on new car purchasers. In Mexico, we collected 1,000 completes with people who have purchased a car in the last 12 months. So, in Mexico, this is a variable that actually changes based on the market that we were focusing on. In Mexico, the market is equally divided between new and used car purchasers. In China, in Japan, and some other emerging markets, we see this split at about 70-30, 70% new car purchases in China versus 30% of used car purchases in China. But here we're seeing a pretty even split. But what is remarkable about Mexico is how fluid the market is. There is low brand loyalty to car manufacturers in Mexico. Only 31% actually purchased the same brand that they owned previously. And in fact, 57% switched brands and 12% are new to the market in general. And this is for new car purchases. When people begin their research, before they really get into looking for their specific car that they're interested in buying, they have some idea of the consideration set of brands that they're and types that they're interested in. But what this slide is showing is that the knowledge of the type of car, by that I mean an economy car, a family car, hatchback, sports car, is better known than the brand or the model. So they're coming to this decision, a very high consideration purchase, already being aware of what's in the market. They're seeing cars on the street. They're taking, they're buying which styles they like, which brands they are attracted to, and they begin their research with an idea of what they're looking for. But what is triggering that purchase decision is included. There are many different triggers. The primary triggers for new car purchases are to increase the fuel efficiency and the latest safety and convenience features. These are the two features that really drive new car purchases versus used car purchases. The others are very similar to used car purchases. And I do apologize for some of the legibility of the graphics. We are collecting a lot of information here. But we really are looking at consumers who are interested in the features of the car that are interesting and helpful to their needs. We also see that former cars no longer functional, driving purchase decisions, as well as needing a second car for the family. On average, new car purchasers have slightly over 2 cars in their family, and they're making about 1.2 million pesos per year. Going back, though, to reinforce the point about price and that not being a high consideration factor in the purchase of a car, better financing options is not an extremely high or well-performing variable in the decision. So ultimately, when people actually made that purchase, how did they make the purchase, and did they follow through with the brand that they initially considered as their first choice? We see that it doesn't happen that way. 28% of the population purchasing cars actually followed through with their first choice, whereas 57% chose a car which was in their initial consideration set. But 15% of these purchasers actually found their car that they ultimately purchased during the research phase of their purchase process. Of the people who selected their first choice, 39% of these car purchasers are loyalists. So 60% had identified a brand that they wanted to switch to as their first choice. So again, you see that it's a very fluid marketplace. People are changing, their needs are changing, their interests are changing, possibly their socioeconomic status is changing, and that all influences this purchase, which they're making once every few years rather than something that they're doing on a daily basis. So let's dive into now what I think is fascinating, and that is how consumer behaviors are changing around high consideration purchases like automobiles. We see that most people in the market are actually turning to the internet first for information when they begin their search. It trumps auto dealerships, in fact. They are going online. They're taking their research in their own hands to make their initial foray into the purchase process. Friends and family, 6%. Word of mouth enhances their research, but it doesn't guide their research initially. Television, 2%. I was kind of surprised at that. Magazines and brochures, whether they're general magazines or auto enthusiast magazines, 3%. And newspapers, 6%. So instead of flipping through the paper, people are going immediately online and looking for the information that they are going to use. Now, moving through the entire purchase process, people use many different sources. You see that the internet and auto dealerships are the most common, and you'll see through the study, the most influential sources that are available. Talk about that. But they do look to friends and family for encouragement in their decisions. They are flipping through the magazines and the newspapers to see if their consideration set is appropriate. But they're secondary. They're tuned into the research process. They're looking for through more sources for information to bolster their decisions. And they're more tuned to television advertising. So they're already in the research process, and they are listening, watching TV. They see an ad. They are much more attuned to actually paying attention. Private sellers, this in used cars certainly spikes much higher. But we do see similar trends for used car purchases. Now, we have, as I've mentioned, fielded this study in 9 different countries already. We'll be doing it in 6 more, actually, in Europe over the next couple of months. But we see similar trends around the world that follow this pattern. It's not just Mexico. What changes are the specific brands that are popular in countries. But we see the internet as being the primary source that people go to first. And then as they get closer to the purchase decision, dealerships become much more important, and we'll get into that. But it's really this online research process, consideration process that leads people into the dealerships, into a physical environment where they can go and see the car, get inside, turn the knobs, play the stereo. And that's very, very important. So how is the internet and dealerships playing a role through the purchase cycle? This is a difficult slide, but let me walk you through it. At each of these different points in the purchase process, we asked respondents to tell us which sources, online sources, dealerships, sellers, friends and family, or traditional media sources, were most influential to helping them through these critical points in the purchase process. And we find that the internet is the most important and influential source to aid discovery of new vehicle makes and models. The dealers are also important, but we see that traditional media is trailing, falls off the cliff when you actually move beyond the internet and dealerships. Helping inform decisions, again, dealerships are important here because you're getting inside the car, you're seeing it in its physical environment, its entirety. But if you look at how we're moving through these processes,